Hello, everybody. This is Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we're back with another of our 5-Minute Histories videos. And today we are in for a treat. Not only are we going to talk about ghost signs, those remnants of advertisements that you see on walls all over the city, some of them 100 years old or older, but we're going to be joined by Lachelle Bynum, a ghost sign aficionado. Lachelle hunts down ghost signs all over the city. She photographs ghost signs. She writes about ghost signs. She knows about as much about ghost signs as anybody I know in Baltimore City, so we're in for a treat. But before I turn it over to her, I thought I'd say just a few words about signs on walls in general. They are about as old as civilization is. We know that the Egyptians had them. We know that in 79 BC in Pompeii, that city that was covered in ashes by Vesuvius, archaeologists found signs for political advertisements on walls. In more modern times, we know that there were signs in London, signs on walls in London in the late 1700s, early 1800s. That may have been in part a public safety measure. In 1762, think of those wonderful pub signs in London, you know, the King's Head or the Golden Fleece. Well, those are great, but they're also really heavy, and sometimes they weren't attached too well. In 1762, one fell down and killed 4 people in the East End in London, and then the London authorities started regulating signs to make sure they were screwed on right, that they were lighter, that they were smaller, and at least in part because of that, businesses started turning to a safer alternative, which was using chalk on the side of their buildings to advertise whatever they were doing, and chalk turned into more permanent paint. The first photographs we have of street signs are in Paris in the 1840s. One of the very earliest photographers, a gentleman, let me make sure I get his name right, William Talbot, photographed street scenes in Paris. And lo and behold, in a lot of those street scenes in the background, you can see advertisements painted on walls. I want to say one more thing before turning it over, and that's where the signs typically are on the buildings. They're typically up pretty high, like this one is. That's because they were advertising to people who were moving around the city on foot, maybe in a streetcar, maybe in a horse and buggy, but people moving kind of slowly. And if your sign was up high, you could advertise for several blocks away. Today, advertisers are mostly focused on people whizzing by in cars, going so fast they don't have the luxury of looking up and around, and so signs are often much lower, almost at eye level. All right, with that, I am going to turn it over to Lachelle.
Hi, my name is Lachelle Bynum. I'm a Baltimore photographer. I am a chaser of the ghost signs. They find me or I find them. I have been chasing these signs for years, photographing them, documenting them. When I find one, the first thing I will do is photograph the wall. I will look and see what sign company painted the wall. In that time, I've noticed that there were 5 sign companies that painted these ghost walls. That was Pritchard, Morton, Globe, Chivalry, and Morton. The painters who painted these signs were known as wall dogs. They were undeniably skilled artists. Some were local, some were from out of town, and worked for those major paint sign companies that I mentioned. The owner of the wall was given a privilege for the use of the wall, which was a smaller ad for their store or cafe. The wall dogs with their ladders and scaffolds would mix their paint, exacting colors, using white for lead and lamp black for black. Some of the painted signs were scaled from drawings. They would execute the design on the wall, making sure the lettering was level, even if the wall wasn't, so that it would give them enough room to paint the sign. Some wall dogs would make a paper pattern of the design and then perforate the lines with the pattern wheel. That would leave a series of holes. They would then fasten the pattern to the wall and pat the outline with a cotton bag full of chalk or powdered charcoal. This bag was called a pounce bag. The result was a dotted line like connected dots. The paint was mixed with linseed oil and varnish and a little bit of gasoline just to help with the drying. In a few short hours, you would have a beautiful sign like this that would last 50 years or more. But with time and the sun, That's where the fading would start to come. Now, the white lead deteriorated the slowest of all. That's why so many signs today are white ghosts of the original. They say some of the signs are only visible after the rain, prompting the name ghost signs. Three of my favorites out of the 200 and some odd ones that I photographed, along with their history, is the Knickerbocker building, which is near the courthouse. I like it because it's so far up and it just has this look about it. I can't explain it. Maybe you can look at it, you see what you feel. Okay, then there's the Meyer and Thalheimer sign. That's one of my favorites too because it has two advertisements on it. When you look at it, you will see the Meyer Thalheimer stationery and engravers. But if you look a little closer, underneath of that is a Sealy Posturepedic advertisement. That's what's so fun when you see them layered like this one, to try to decipher what is under that. Because with this one, you see the carriage and wagon, but there's the Cubanola cigar, but there's something under there. So that's a good one to decipher. And the very first one that caught my eye that made me start all of this was Lenny's House of Naturals. It was also the first and only African American one that I'd ever seen in the city. That's where back in the day where Oprah and everybody used to go get their afros done. So that building was actually knocked down maybe 2 years ago. I do, however, have many more signs to shoot because until this, I never saw this one and I love it. It's vibrant, it's got the double thing going on, and it's really cool. So they'll find me or I'll find them. Thank you.
Well, holy cow. Thank you, Michelle. White lead paint lasting the longest. Ghost sign origins. Who knew? This was fabulous. All right, let me wrap up by saying a word about the sign behind us and have to say a quick thanks to Jacques Kelly, writer for The Sun, who did a wonderful story several years ago. This sign, maybe one of the reasons that it is still so vibrant is that it was underneath siding for years and years and years. And it was uncovered several years ago, and apparently a gentleman in the neighborhood, and we're here on Fayette and Duncan Streets, and a gentleman named Evan Woodward was passing by and got intrigued, and he started digging, maybe a little bit like Michelle did. And if you look up at the top of this sign, you will see the words Nicholas Faustich Carriage and Wagon. And he got curious about that and called up a place called the Carriage Museum of America. Who knew that we had a carriage museum in America? But he found out that this company was a wagon maker since at least 1914. Jacques Kelly did a little bit more research and found out after they left, the building was used as a warehouse for a company called Little Potts Company. And they sold, of all things, washing machines, televisions, and porch gliders. Sounds kind of 1950s and 60s to me. And then when they left, the building sat empty for a while. It was vacant. But it went up for auction. It was bought by a new owner who undid the siding and revealed these wonderful signs. How about the Cubanola cigar sign? Cubanola was a cigar made by the American Tobacco Company. It was made in places like New York and Philadelphia and Camden, New Jersey. And we don't know, I don't know a whole lot about it. Its advertisements were all over the place. There's another Cubanola ghost sign in Canton. And if you were in a city in the Northeast, you probably would have seen lots of them. Apparently the tobacco company spent a lot on advertising even back then. So I don't know how good a quality the cigars were, but we do know that they cost 5 cents. All right, I'm going to wrap up and say thanks again to Michelle. I think that we are going to have to do another video about another batch of ghost signs somewhere in Baltimore City. All right, thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.